I'm your host, Emily Lauren Dick. Welcome to the Tame the Shame podcast, where we celebrate those shamelessly being themselves. We're here to inspire you to live a perfectly imperfect life, embrace the body you've got, and take back your power so you can live the life you want. Stick around if you want to listen to me get comfortably uncomfortable with all the things that make us feel ashamed. Welcome, everyone, to the Tame the Shame podcast show. Today, I'd like to welcome Dara Melanson, who is a relationship coach that has helped women all over the world let go of the patterns keeping them stuck in their relationships and help them create secure partnerships of their dreams. After calling off her own wedding in 2020, she developed a deep understanding and passion for guiding clients through the complexities of love, intimacy, and personal growth. Dara, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your story and what brought you to this line of work.
It's a juicy one because nowhere in a million years did I think I would be sitting here saying, I'm a relationship coach. You know, growing up, I really was that kid who loved to achieve. I was a competitive dancer. In school, I always got really good grades. I was always kind of that kid that succeeded at things early or really well. I was always called that old soul, the kind of mature child. And I really carried that into adulthood. And what I didn't realize was I was carrying that into adulthood, and I thought love had to be earned. I thought it was something that you have to really work for. And that's based on some childhood trauma that I have, which maybe we get into later or another episode, but that definitely was living there in my subconscious. And I remember being in grade 8 and I went to this diversity camp at school, and there was a boy there, and we ended up being buddies on MSN. We dated a little in high school and then went our separate ways. But I'd created this fantasy around this person. And even though I continued to date a few people after that, I would always say, oh, I'm definitely going to marry that person. Like this massive fantasy. Fate is going to bring us back together. And lo and behold, when I was around 20, we did reconnect. And when I look back, though, it was very highs and lows, emotional roller coaster. Like, does he want to be with me? Does he not? Is this going to be the time it works out? Is it not? And we ultimately did end up in a relationship again, which carried on for the next 7 years. We bought a house together, we got a dog together, and we did ultimately get engaged.
Wow.
And this fate, this destiny, this fantasy that I really had, when push came to shove, I felt scared when he proposed. I had a moment where I froze and I went, oh, is it supposed to feel like this? And that was back in 2019. And I even have chills thinking about it, remembering and feeling so ashamed. Like, why am I not happier about this? Isn't this what I've wanted? Isn't this what I've wanted since I was, 13 or even younger, when we're little girls and we're so excited about that engagement and getting proposed to in the wedding? And why do I feel this impending sense of doom?
Yeah.
And that really began my journey of looking inward at the relationship and trying to figure out what was going on. And initially, I really wanted to suppress and push down that nudge. I didn't want to feel doubt. I wanted to marry this person. I really did. And I didn't understand these nudges or feelings or random thoughts and sensations I was getting of, is this the right relationship? Like, is this really the best it gets? Is this the person for me? Am I making the right call? And as the wedding was approaching, I started getting even more anxious. My hair was falling out. I started having issues, down in my private parts. And there was a lot of physical manifestations of being really unwell.
Yeah.
And I started to have deep anxiety and panic. And what's so funny is I thought it was around work. I wanted it to be anything
deflection
but my relationship. Yeah. And I ended up hiring my first coach. And I really thought, it's like, I got to get my life together. There's something wrong with me. Like, what is wrong with me that I'm not happy with what society has told me should make me happy? I have the guy who's loyal, the guy who's kind, We have the house, the white picket fence, we have the dog, I have the ring. Like, we both have these great jobs. Life on paper is perfect. And so why do I feel so deeply unfulfilled and unhappy?
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned in 2019 was so much about myself and how I operated in relationships was actually a big part of what was holding me back from that fulfillment.
Wow.
And yeah, it really started with, and this is typical of people trying to change him at the time. If he just did this, or if he just met my need here, if
Yeah.
he just XYZ, then we'll be fine. Then I'll be okay. This will all
Mm-hmm.
work out. And when I realized, oh, this isn't actually about him, this is about me, that is when everything changed. So to kind of summarize, the story, I ultimately called off our wedding in June of 2020. It was a random Tuesday evening. We'd just gone for a walk, got home, and I just said, I don't want to get married. And he said, now
Wow.
or ever? And I said, ever.
Wow.
And that led me on a path to, that summer I moved back to my mom's house. I went from a 3-bedroom, bathroom to, double garage. I always had this little script for my house, right? I was so status based, but I was really proud of this house. But I went from this house and this life to moving back to my mom's house in a little bedroom with a single bed, like a twin, bed. And I'd never been happier at that point. And
Wow.
yeah, and I quit my job actually as well at the time. I was working for the government full time. And I just said, no, I don't want what's perfect on paper. I want
Mm-hmm.
what feels deeply fulfilling in my soul. That's what
I
I want
love that.
to guide my life. And 3 months later, after sharing on Instagram about my story, I shared how we had broken up and how I was doing. And through that summer, I just continued to be vulnerable. And then that's when I got my first request from a woman who was experiencing some doubt and confusion in her relationship too. She asked, will you coach me? And then 3 years later, here I am now, and I've coached women all over the
Oh
world.
my goodness, what a story. Ending a
Mm-hmm.
relationship can be very hard. And I remember you actually posting something along the lines of being the one to initiate a breakup doesn't mean it's any less painful. Since you were the one who initiated the end of your relationship, tell me a bit about the shame you experienced during that time, whether it was self-imposed or from outside sources, and how did you handle that?
Great question. You know, so much of it was self imposed. Shame is really that experience of thinking that we are flawed as a human, right? That there's something deeply wrong with us. And because there isn't enough normalization, which is why it became my mission, but because there still isn't enough normalization that it's okay to break up with someone, it doesn't make you evil or a villain, or someone
Mm-hmm.
who's, heartless or impulsive. Because it's still so stigmatized, it's not talked about enough, or the experiences aren't shared enough. And so we carry all this shame, again, those questions of what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy? He's a good person, potentially. That comes up a lot too. But the shame
Mm-hmm.
of being the one to break up with someone else is so deeply ingrained because, especially if we're women, we have
Mm-hmm.
been raised and taught our whole lives to be polite, kind, and care for other people's experience.
And
And to
not put
break up with
ourselves first,
someone,
right? Yeah.
no, definitely not. It's like, what concept is that? And to break up with someone is to alter their life forever. And I don't say that to be dramatic. Like, I actually say that to normalize that because, yeah,
Yeah.
breakup does change the trajectory of one's life, right? When we are
Mm-hmm.
with someone, we plan a future with them, or we have an idea of what a future might look like with them. And so to separate and uncouple changes that trajectory. And so not only is there shame around that, there's shame because most often, you know, we can definitely put, some language to there's some values that are probably misaligned or some needs not being met.
Yeah.
But overall, there's just this deep knowing something's not right
Mm-hmm.
here. And
Wow.
the shame is not knowing for certain that we're right. And it means we have to
Oh.
believe in ourselves, which is also something society has not really instilled in us to know how to do, specifically as women.
100%. 100%. So, what is your advice for someone wanting to leave an unfulfilling relationship but isn't sure if they're ready or what the next steps are or what to do?
Hmm. The first thing I would say is just to have some self compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not fluff, that's not woo woo. It is really important that we treat ourselves with love and compassion when we are considering a big decision like this. Most of the women who are feeling like this is not something that has happened overnight. I'm guessing it's been something that they've been living with for months and often years as well. And I had too. When I look back, it was definitely at least
Mm-hmm.
2 years that I had these doubts. So, if somebody is listening right now and there's confusion around, is this my intuition guiding me or is this fear? Am I getting in my own way? The best thing that we can do, first of all, is understand doubt is normal in
Mm-hmm.
any relationship. So many people don't know this. They think doubt automatically means something is wrong and we must break up. When in reality, even the healthiest couples experience doubt. And when we actually look at doubt as an opportunity, that's when our minds can totally shift and become open minded, right? Doubt tells us maybe we've grown, maybe we're desiring newness, maybe we've evolved as a person,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the relationship's gotten a little bit comfortable and we need to kind of, reignite some of that emotional connection. But it's actually
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity. It's not a death sentence.
I love that.
Now, with that said, so many women specifically try to deal with doubt alone inside.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, when we're in a relationship with someone else, there comes the point where we have to involve them in that process, right? For us to figure out if doubt is there for a reason and it's actually time to move on, or if reconnection is possible, we have to source that courage that all of us have. Every single person in the world has courage. It just means doing something scared, right? And
Mm-hmm.
actually let our partner know.
I think that's super important. And it's a nice reminder too that not all, situations mean that, you need to leave and that you just need to work through sort of those feelings and deal with them instead of pushing them down and listen to what they're really saying to you. I think that's amazing. So obviously
Yeah.
this situation in your life, although was very difficult, brought you to your calling, which is helping women heal from unhelpful relationship patterns and learn to accept themselves so that they can have these healthy relationships. What types of women do you find you end up working with most? Is it the people who are in relationships, ending relationships, wanting a relationship, or is it a mix of everything?
It really is a mix, but I would say that I mostly call in women who are feeling disconnected and questioning their
Mm-hmm.
relationship, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But as humans, aside from whatever relationship phase they're in, there are some common themes. I typically call in women who feel anxious in relationships and ultimately typically have an anxious attachment style, which I know we can get into later. But yes, feeling a lot of anxiety in the relationship. There's a lack of self trust. There's often a lot of
Mm-hmm.
self doubt, self criticism going on. And these women are typically the caretakers in the relationship. They're, the
Wow.
ones who are often told they're too sensitive, too needy, always making a problem out of nothing, like are never happy. When in reality, these women are just extremely emotionally attuned
Mm-hmm.
and crave a deep, meaningful emotional connection and haven't quite figured out that subconsciously they might be playing out old patterns that are actually resulting in being with partners who can't meet those needs.
Yes. So, can you
Mhm.
explain what anxious attachment is and talk a little bit about the process from going from anxious to secure?
Absolutely. So, to explain what anxious attachment is, I will briefly just explain what attachment theory is. And attachment theory is really, if we just say it in very simple terms, it's the theory of looking at what were our earliest attachments like in childhood to our
Mm.
parents or caregivers, and really looking at how emotionally attuned were they to our needs. So a child who grows up and their parents are emotionally attuned to their needs, they are present, they are available, not just physically, but also emotionally most of the time, that child will grow up to be what we call securely attached, which means they're
Hmm.
okay with kind of people coming and going. They have a good self esteem and they're able to handle the stress that life kind of sends their way. When a child have parents or caregivers who are sometimes emotionally attuned and other times not available, an example might be, when they do something really well at school, their parents celebrate them, give them big hugs and kisses and say, I'm so proud of you, I love you, you're so smart. And then other times, maybe they have a tantrum or an anger outburst or are frustrated, and their parents say, I can't deal with this. Stop crying, go
Hmm.
to your room, and when you're calm, come back out.
Yeah.
This would be an example of inconsistency in emotional attunement. And that inconsistency creates hypervigilance, walking on eggshells, and uncertainty in the child. And this is what creates anxious attachment. Because
Mm.
now that child, instead of growing up feeling really a sense of wholeness in themselves and trust in themselves, now often becomes, their life kind of centers around, our mom and dad or whoever the caregivers are. Are they okay with me? Are they mad at me? Are we all right? Do I
Mm.
need to earn their love by achieving or being a good girl? Right. And so that's anxious attachment. And just to kind of give full circle, avoidant attachment is when parents are often not emotionally attuned basically at all. And these children are often left to be self reliant, to handle problems on their own. They spend a lot of time alone and they do grow up to have, high self esteem and are able to handle life's problems really well, but struggle to let people in. So that's just kind
Mm.
of an overview. But zeroing in on anxious attachment, again, this looks like low self esteem, but high emotional attunement to other people's needs. These people are the ones who can predict what somebody needs and are really thoughtful and caring, but they also need a lot of, or tend to need a lot of reassurance. For these
Hmm.
people, there's a big fear of abandonment or rejection. And so they might be people in relationships who often are, will seek reassurance or validation a little more often. And it can come across as needy. However, there's no such thing as being needy. We just have needs and either
I
people are
love
able
that.
to meet
Oh,
them,
I love
right? Like,
that.
yeah, yeah. If someone says you're too needy, like tell them to go find someone who's less. Like,
Yes.
that's not
Yeah.
our problem here. But anxious attachment can really, it's a struggle in relationships, and I know this because that's what I had. My dad left when I was 16, and for the first 16 years of my life, everything was great. Like I felt like there was emotional attunement, and then when he left, it changed. And so I found myself in relationships, you know, being really insecure a lot of the times, really trying to
Hmm.
figure out what does my partner want from me, what will make them happy. And my whole kind of identity became around trying to be whoever I thought I needed to be to secure the love and security that I was deeply craving. But it becomes backwards because then we actually feel even more insecure and unsafe in doing so because we're not being who we really are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wonder too, aside from our upbringing, are there other things that can affect this anxious attachment? Because I feel like as women, we have all this media coming at us, all this body pressure to look and appear and act a certain way. I wonder if that also can play a role in how we are in relationships. Do you think that is a factor as well?
100%. So, the theory kind of looks back at our childhood attachments, but it can happen at any time in our lives. And also, it's really important to say that, once an attachment style is developed, it does not mean it's ours for life, right? Like if
Oh,
somebody listening has an
good.
anxious attachment style, like it's something we learn. And the beauty of that means we can unlearn it. And there's actually a fourth attachment style, but we won't get into that right now. But we actually, I almost like to look at it like quadrants. And depending where are at in our lives and who we're surrounded by, we can kind of shift in and out. So, for example, we want to be secure most of the time. That's the goal. But then the beauty is when we're feeling insecure, what other way do we lean, right? So that's the
Mm.
question. But It can be a past relationship that alters our attachment style. I've worked with women who were secure growing up with their and are secure with their parents, but ended up in a relationship where that unfortunately shifted based on how they were treated in the relationship. It can absolutely come from, movies, media, Hollywood. I mean, you might have seen on my account, I talk a lot about rom-coms and romance movies and
Yes.
how it's like,
Yes.
I'm a sucker for a good rom-com. Okay. Like I love a good rom-com. And when we're watching, we have to, or we want to really be aware that this is not a healthy indication most of the time of healthy
No.
love. Because
It
let's
doesn't
be
look like the
honest.
real thing. But yet we compare it
No.
to what we see in the movies and in the magazines and the books
Yeah.
and all of that.
For sure. But let's be honest, like who's going to watch a movie about two people who meet and, slowly get to know each other and are open-minded and then suddenly get into a relationship and navigate, repair when they need to, like it'd be boring, quote unquote
There's no
boring. Like
drama in that.
there's
Yeah.
mic drop, there's no drama. But you know what is drama? It is the concept called the anxious avoidant trap. And this is something within attachment theory. And it is in almost every single rom-com and romance movie. The whole enemies to lovers. It's
Yes.
really anxious avoidant trap.
Ah, interesting. And I love reading those books.
Me too. Like so much. But we're raised to think like, oh, love is I'm supposed to chase this man. I'm supposed to
Yes.
give up my job for love and
Change
give
my
everything
appearance. Yeah.
Yes.
Become what he wants.
Yes, or even, I think of so many movies where the woman is the successful CEO or whatever, but she's labeled, the bitch. And it's like, why can't she, why is she automatically a bitch? Why isn't she's embodied or she knows what she wants and she has boundaries and she has standards, right? Like, so in
true.
terms of your question around anxious attachment, yeah, because all we see is anxious attachment in women. And oftentimes in movies, though, we see where they ultimately get the guy.
Yes.
But that is not realistic. And just because they get the guy, we rarely see the story after that. Right? We assume the happily ever after.
Yeah, but you never know, right?
But those of us in real life who have anxious attachment and end up with the guy, we know there's a lot more to the story once we're in that relationship of that hardship, that struggle, and that constant wonder, like, am I enough? Does this person love me? What's going on here? Anxious attachment is really painful in relationships, especially with somebody who has an avoidant attachment style.
So people who are anxiously attached, there's got to be a lot of shame that is tied to being in that sort of category, whether they know it or not. Do you think it's because it's seen as a vulnerability or a weakness? And, how important is vulnerability in overcoming shame in relationships? And how can couples cultivate a safe and supportive environment to share those vulnerabilities? Sorry, that was like 10 questions in one.
No, I'm actually just taking a moment to let that question land because I know the answer is going to be really healing, I think, for a lot of people. And that's, anxious attachment gets a bad rep in society because of those qualities that tend to come out, seeking reassurance, some anxiety. There's more emotion for sure. With someone who has an anxious attachment style, there's a lot of emotion that can come up. And we've been told our whole lives, don't be emotional, don't be sensitive, don't be needy. Be the cool girl, play the cool chick, right? And so it kind of goes against the grain there. And so it gets a bad rep. And so there is an internalized shame, not just from society, but oftentimes, honestly, through the generations. Where again, we as women have been told, be seen, not heard, keep your opinions to yourselves. And it's really important to remember it's only been a couple generations where as women, we can own a home. We can have our own income. We can choose to leave a relationship. I mean, it honestly is not that long ago that women couldn't even file for divorce, or they would be, like that they were fully dependent. And there are still women who are dependent financially on men because we're still in the process of really
we got work to
letting
do.
go of those old patterns. Yeah. So, to women listening, like really cut yourself some slack because we're still in what I call, I have chills again, but like the cycle breaker generation in relationships. And I really believe that. And we are not just breaking those cycles for us, but we are breaking that for all of our foremothers who have come before us, our mothers, our grandmothers, great grandmothers, etc. And some of that resistance we feel is their resistance too. It's stuff that they couldn't do, right?
Damn
So
straight.
yeah, an anxious attachment style. There's also a lot there when we are triggered. I mean, every attachment style has what's called protest strategies. And this is what we do when our attachment style gets triggered. So there's a lot of shame around the protest strategies for someone with an anxious attachment style because it can be, quote unquote, a lot. I'll give you some examples. You know, when I was really deep into my anxious attachment style, if I perceived that my partner was not interested in something I would lash out. If I didn't feel I was being heard, I would go for the jugular and I would get really cruel. And, you know, or I remember, I'll never forget one time we were having an argument and we were going back and forth. And someone with an anxious attachment style, again, the fear is the abandonment and the rejection. And so we want to figure things out immediately. We struggle to sit in that discomfort of not being okay, quote unquote, right, with our partner. And so we will beat a conversation to death because
let's stay up till 4 a.m. Yeah.
That's right. And if we're with someone who has an avoidant attachment style or even secure, you know, there is a lot of healthiness in being able to take a pause. And that's something that someone who's active in the anxious can struggle with. And I'll never forget one time, my partner at the time, my ex-fiance, who had an avoidant attachment style, he said, like, Dara, I really need a break. He was shutting down and that would trigger me too. When he shut down, I could not handle that. And I wasn't listening and kept going. And he actually started walking away physically. And I chased him and he went into the spare bedroom and had to lock the door and I was trying to get in. And so I share this because at the time I would feel so much shame. It felt like something was taking over my body and making me like act in these like, I don't like the word crazy, but act in these ways that were just wild. Yeah. But this was my nervous system in overdrive. And it was bringing up all of the abandonment and rejection wounds from my childhood that still hadn't been processed. And what happens when we're in that state is we're no longer seeing the person in front of us. Yeah. We are like thrust into the past, into all the times that we've
sort of like a reenactment, right? Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And so there's a lot of shame there. And almost all of the women I work with have this deep shame around like, what's wrong with me? I become so cruel and I was chasing him or I called him 70 times and, you know, and he wouldn't answer and doing all, or I'm stalking the social media, et cetera. And again, this stems from that deep desire to feel safe again, to feel secure again. And we're used to the highs and lows because in childhood, most often I'd like to say, we learned love is turbulent. We learned love is highs and lows. That it's an emotional roller coaster. Right. That's all we know. So also there's shame for someone with an anxious attachment style, there's shame a lot of the time when things are going well. We tend to create something that goes wrong or we pick a fight. Yeah. Because we're looking for that chaos because our nervous system has been
That's what wired. We're used to. Yeah.
Yep. It's wired to believe that chaos is safety. And this is why anxious people also, they'll meet a secure person, let's say when dating. And I always know someone has an anxious attachment style, or I should say often, it's not all the time, because they'll go, I don't know, it was just boring. There was no spark. I didn't get butterflies. And it's like, no, that's actually the goal. Butterflies is anxiety. It means you're feeling a bit, activated.
I love that.
Yeah. Think about it. When we get butterflies, like really just take a second and think like that's that flutter in your stomach. And also think about times we get anxious. It's often some type of flutter in the abdomen area, in the stomach area.
You know what? Now that you say that, like I'm thinking about when I met my husband and the thing I liked about him was he made me feel calm. And, we've been together almost 11 years now and definitely have had our fair share of ups and downs and things to work through and all different types of attachment theories in our lives. But but yeah, like just thinking about when I first met him, now that you've said that, like it wasn't like nerves and those sparky feelings that you think you should get. It was a sense of calmness. And I think we were comfortable with each other. And I think that was a good sign, I guess. Now that you said it that way, I've never thought about it.
It is a really good sign. Imagine we're going out with coffee or out for coffee, maybe with a friend or something, and suddenly you're getting butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean in a romantic way, but we'd kind of go, oh, I don't know. I feel kind of anxious right now. We would automatically kind of look at it as anxiety. Like, why do I feel anxious around this person? And yet, again, because of Hollywood and media and movies and books, butterflies and quote unquote the spark has been romanticized, and it's not actually healthy. Again, that's what creates that drama. All that is telling us is our nervous system has become activated and is recognizing the familiarity of whatever we are perceiving that person, which often is, do they like me? It's a lot of those questions. We start really focusing on them. Right?
And there's got to be a difference between nerves too. Yeah. Yes. Is there a difference between like, just general nervousness of getting to know someone and like the sick sort of butterfly feeling like, okay, this is not right. How can you tell sort of the difference?
Yeah, that's a really important discernment. And you know what? It doesn't happen overnight. There are some kind of tips and tricks, but it's really a journey of paying attention when it comes up and learning our own kind of tells, I guess you could say, about what's nervousness to us and what's anxiety to us. What I can say is nerves typically are something that are situational, and they happen often before something, right? Before I was getting ready for this podcast, I was feeling a little nervous, but there was an energy to it of where I was able to stay grounded within myself, though. I wasn't having questions of, is Emily going to think I'm a good guest? I wasn't worried about you. It was my own excitement and nerves. Like, how am I going to do? I hope this goes well. There's kind of a curiosity and a hope there. That's usually when it's nervousness, right? I'm pushing my own boundaries. Yeah, right. It tends to be times when we are about to expand or about to grow, or typically are doing something that scares us. Whereas butterflies, right? Meeting someone, that's typically more of kind of a jittery, anxious. There's an activation in the body. Often it's almost adrenaline kind of feeling. And we become really hyper-focused on the person that we're feeling that with. Oh, are they looking at me? Do they think I look pretty right now? Or, oh, what do they think of me? Or are they enjoying me? Are they going to kiss me? It suddenly becomes really chaotic in the mind. There's a lot of thoughts going on.
Okay.
And that tends to be, in my opinion, what I've noticed the difference is when I'm really in my mind a lot and focused on the other people around me. To me, that's more of an anxiety that's coming up, whereas nerves, it's often just kind of situational. It happens before, and then they tend to dissolve pretty quickly. And, just like it happened here, I feel so safe with you. I feel great. I feel calm. There's no more nerves, right?
I love
that's
that.
Why I notice the difference.
I think that's a good thing that people need to know to navigate the differences between. How can couples who are already together cultivate like a safe and supportive environment to share their vulnerabilities?
Yeah, it's really a journey, and there needs to be open-mindedness and transparency. And again, attachment styles can alter, which also means if, there's people listening who have an anxious attachment style or avoidant or whatever it might be. And again, it doesn't mean it's doomed, right? But how secure attachment can be cultivated is through trust and open conversations. A lot of relationships, a lot of couples don't actually speak about what needs to be spoken about. So let me kind of reword that. Couples often say, when you ask, like, what's the number one issue in your relationship? What do they say? What do you think it is?
Oh, I don't know. Communication mismatch, I would say. Like,
yep. Communication. You're bang on. And what couples don't realize, though, is they're focused on the communication styles, which is important. Like that definitely does matter. But what the number one issue typically is It's actually what's not being communicated.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
We keep so much in, again, because vulnerability has been so shamed in society. And, in the last couple of years, I think we've made a lot of progress as a society to normalize it more and to encourage it and see it as a strength, not a weakness. But still in relationships, I mean, if our partner kind of hurts our feelings or continues to do things, a lot of times we think, well, I've let it go on this long. Like, what's the point in bringing it up? Or, well, I mean, I knew they were like this when I got with them. So who am I to, try to say something now? And there's so much shame when we grow or evolve. So we just don't bring it up
Yes. Yes.
when we need to. We need to bring it
Oh.
up. We have to talk about these things, right? A healthy relationship does not mean it's perfect. It does not mean everything is swell all the time. Every relationship in the world has problems. So it's not about trying to avoid problems or avoid differences between people, because let's be honest, we're human, we're imperfect, we all have different childhoods and experiences. Like, we're never going to completely match a person, right? And we don't really want to. That would create a really small box of a perspective of the world, right? But to develop secure attachment, it involves the willingness to be honest, the willingness to take accountability when we make mistakes or when we hurt our partner, and then to take action to try to correct that moving forward.
Yes.
Secure attachment is about go ahead. Yeah.
Even when it's scary, right? To be able to speak up.
I'll give you an example, and this one's pretty vulnerable for me to share, actually, where when I'm struggling mentally, hygiene tends to be something that slips for me. And I remember my ex-fiance had brought it up a couple times towards the end, and I honestly just kind of passed it off, didn't really give much to it. I'm like, well, I'm struggling, I'm not doing well, and he doesn't care about me, etc.
Yeah.
And then when we broke up, I kind of, honestly, I was just like, oh, that was just, a situational thing there. Until I realized, oh no, this is something that happens. And with my current partner, it was a couple months ago where I'll never forget, we were sitting on the couch and he kind of just was like, oh, something kind of smells. And I was like, oh, really? And he kind of smelled my feet and he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what it could be. And I was kind of playful. And then I realized he was serious. And he actually said, he goes, Dara, I really don't know how to say this. And I'm so scared of hurting your feelings. And like, I'm struggling a bit because I want to be able to help you, but I'm noticing you're really not showering often. And it's starting to affect my ability to feel like even physically connected. And he had tears in his eyes as he was saying this to me. And of course, immediately I'm, wanting to get my back up, and it's feeling so self-conscious and embarrassed.
That mortification. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, oh my gosh. Like, I genuinely didn't realize I was smelling. And regardless of, what we're moving through, there's still an ounce of like noticing when it can impact others. Right. And he was holding this with so much love and care and safety and wanting to not hurt my feelings, but it was resulting in him, whether we like it or not, like pulling away a bit. And it took so much courage for him to bring that up to me. And it's been, something that we continue to talk about. And it actually is what has been able to help me with this pattern, and to actually realize like a lot of it is rooted in self-sabotage, I thought it had, and it does sometimes have to do with not feeling totally mentally well. Yeah. A lot of it is deep rooted self-sabotage. And I've been able to make more progress than I've made in years around this. And I no longer get activated if he asks me like, oh, have you showered like recently? I don't get activated over the question anymore. Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's so
good.
It's
not about me getting in trouble, or he's not going to leave me over this. He cares about me.
Yeah. Oh, well, with your when you're with the right partner, right?
Yes. So talking about things like we actually have to get honest, and a relationship, that foundation is built on, again, not just what's going well, but a couple's ability to navigate when things aren't going well. It's a sum of, how do we navigate the differences between us, right? It's, the quote unquote couple, the one who loves to be early and the one who's always late, or the one who likes to leave a party early and the one who wants to be the one to, be there
Oh
till
my
the end.
gosh. Yeah.
Is that resonating?
You're speaking to me. I'm super, super, super regimented. Like, I love schedules, love routine. And my husband is like, when he's done like work for the day, he's like, I just need to like chill out for a bit. Like, please don't tell me dinner's this, blah, 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 blah. And once we communicated that to each other, which was actually fairly recent, like things have been so much better. Like it's a challenge to me to take it a little bit easier on the schedule and stuff. And like we had really young kids for the last few years, so that was a really important part. But finding ways to not be as regimented, at least in terms of like our relationship, our reconnecting at the end of the day, has really helped. Because for him, he needs that to unwind, to relax, whereas I need a little bit more structure to feel relaxed. So meeting in the middle.
Meeting in the middle, compromise. I actually love that you brought this up, and I would love to take a sec to talk about the difference between compromise and sacrifice in a relationship, because I think they are often confused.
Yes. 100%. You always go like, oh, well, if he doesn't like me as I am, then, screw him. Right. So tell me all the things.
Let's get into it. So, because this is something I realized, I'm like, times I think I'm compromising, I'm actually sacrificing, or times I want compromise from someone else. And also it doesn't just have to be with a partner. It can be anyone in our lives. I found, and I really had to take responsibility, that times I thought I was asking for compromise, I was actually requesting sacrifice, which is not healthy in any relationship. And again, with my ex-fiance, I'll never forget, he said towards the end, it was a couple weeks before we ultimately broke up, and we were talking about compromise. And he actually said, he goes, well, I think love is sacrifice. If you love someone, you're willing to do anything for them. And I remember thinking, I used to believe that too, and I no longer do. Because if we have to sacrifice who we are, our values, what's important to us to secure love, then that's not really a secure love, right? That is a conditional love. And often it's a love based on a version of us that's not really real. Yeah. So when we look at compromise and sacrifice, compromise, what that actually means, it means all parties have to come in a little. It's working as a team to find a reasonable solution to differences. But again, it's both kind of coming in, and one might come in a little more than the other, but there is this degree of we are coming towards one another to make this compromise, to be on the same page. Whereas sacrifice often is one person is entirely giving up whatever their stance is to make the other person happy, right? So I could give you an example if that would be helpful.
Yes.
I remember with my my current partner, Sam, who is such a gem, but it was his brother's wedding, and weddings tend to go late, right? Like 1:30 a.m. Whatever it is. And he and I am the one who leaves the party early. I'm often the first to go, and he typically is the one who loves to be there till the end, the life of the party. And we were at the wedding, and I had given him a heads up like hours before. I said, I'm probably good to stay till 1:30, but not much longer. And anyway, that time rolled around, and I was ready to go. And so I want to show the differences between what, in this scenario, what a compromise is and what a sacrifice is, or like the kind of alternate routes, right? Sacrifice would have been when I approached him and said, hey, I'm actually ready to go in the next half hour. How about you? And him saying, oh no, like I really want to stay, Dara, please, like let's just stay another hour, which is what he said. Like, oh no, like, everyone's going to kind of hang out. Sacrifice would have been either me saying, oh, okay, all right, like I can stay another hour, hour and a half. Now keep in mind, I had already compromised a bit and stayed a bit later. I feel it's important to add. But sacrifice would have been me saying, okay, to make him happy, right? And to stay. And alternatively, sacrifice for him would have been, okay, all right, like I'll come with you.
Yes.
Okay. The compromise that we did which ultimately actually really created a beautiful foundation in our relationship, was I said, no problem, honey, and I want you to enjoy yourself and stay as long as you'd like. I'm going to leave in half hour. I'll catch an Uber and then just meet me at home when you're ready. Now,
Perfect.
don't get me wrong. I cried in the cab home. Of course, I wanted him to come with me. I wasn't crying because
Yeah.
I was mad at him or frustrated. A previous version of me would have. A previous version of me
Mm-hmm.
would have used that as a test to see if
Mm-hmm.
he, quote unquote, loved me enough or cared and would have come with me.
Yes.
I was just sad that, you know what, this is probably a difference between us that will be something we have to navigate, and that we
Mm-hmm.
won't always arrive at a party together or leave an event together, and that's okay. But I was so proud of myself for honoring what I wanted, and so was he. And the
Mm-hmm.
next day he actually said, you know what, Dara, once you had left, I wish I had come with you. And slowly
Mm-hmm.
over time, we've built a really good way of gauging where, I'll
Mm-hmm.
sometimes nudge him like, are you sure you want to stay? Or are you kind of caught up in the moment? Like, take a couple
Yes.
minutes. And sometimes he comes with me and sometimes he's really firm, like, no, I'm staying. But we found a
Yeah.
way to honor our own approach to social time
Mm-hmm.
without having to sacrifice or change who we are for the other. And we accept each other's limits when it comes to that. So that would be an example I would share.
That's such a good example. And I think honestly, just like you using your life as examples, your previous relationship and your current relationship, I think that's so important to see that and to be able to normalize some of these things that are coming up in everyday relationships that we don't always see or hear about, right? Especially with Instagram, and you only see the highlights in people's lives. So I think it's really important to talk about these things, but also to normalize that these things are very much normal and
Yes. And it's
okay and
okay to
healthy.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean, that's why it was so important for me to say, like, and I cried on the way home. When I told him that, I said, I actually cried. I was sad. And he was like, it's not just important to normalize having
Mm-hmm.
these differences or differences in the way we approach life, but also normalizing how we feel about the differences. But
Yeah.
how we feel doesn't necessarily have to mean something is wrong, right? Like me crying
Mm-hmm.
does not mean something is wrong. It meant I was feeling sad in that moment, and that's valid, but it doesn't always have to mean something more. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been part of becoming more securely attached too, is noticing like an emotion is coming up and we're going to feel that, and then figuring
Mm-hmm.
out, does it mean something more, does it not, right? But
Yes.
I
And I
mean,
think
there's
not
problems again,
weaponizing
right?
it too, right? Not weaponizing
Mm-hmm.
those things in relationships. That's been a huge thing for me, learning, like, to be able to tell my partner, like, I'm upset, I want to cry right now. It's kind of related to this situation which you are a part of, but I'm not like angry at you. I'm not saying anything that you need to change. Like, I just need to feel this right now. And like, can you just hold that space for me and let me feel, and, give me the space without, making it an issue. And I find just talking about those things now, like, just, like kind of providing commentary on
Mm-hmm.
feelings and emotions has been also a game changer for us, because normally it'd be like, she's crying, so that means that I've done something wrong and I have to do something to fix it. Now it can just be, I'm crying because I'm crying. It might be because of something that's happened. It just might be me feeling my emotions too, right?
Wow, that is, yeah, thank you for sharing. That is so powerful to hear that that's the dynamic you guys have created. And when I hear you describe that, I'm hearing emotional intelligence, right? Which is the ability
Mm-hmm.
to hold emotions subjectively and not make it about us, right?
And it
A
takes
lot of
work
times
though.
it does it, and I'm on that journey too, like all the time. And yeah, but there's emotional intelligence there. It's
Mm-hmm.
communication. So many people, specifically with an anxious attachment style, we don't realize, but we actually want partners to mind read.
Yes.
It's the phrase that I see a lot of times going around on social media. If he wanted to, he would. And it's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes want is there, but are they aware that we want
Yes,
something
of
from
your
them? Like,
need.
right?
Yeah. And needs
Yes.
change in the moment too. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the most frustrating thing. Like, sometimes I want lots of space, and other times I want to feel like you are surrounding me with your love and your time and stuff, right?
Yes.
So how is someone supposed to be able to, like you said, mind read?
Yes, and that often is, stems from childhood where we were fully dependent on our parents to kind of pick up on our needs. We look to them to
Hmm.
feed us our meals, to put clothes on our back, to create a shelter, to hug us when we cry, ideally, in those scenarios. They, in a sense, we felt like they were mind reading, right? And when we
Yes.
don't necessarily receive that security in childhood, we grow up with a little bit of this, like sometimes they call it a Peter Pan syndrome, where
Hmm.
we fantasize finding the one or a person who will just know exactly what we need because they know us so well and love us so much. When in
Yes.
reality, it is our responsibility to communicate what we need and
Hmm.
desire. And it is our responsibility to communicate, period. Right.
Hmm.
If the quote unquote, it's typically women, when the guy says, everything okay? And the woman says,
Fine.
yeah, I'm fine. And really, there's so much under that statement. And the
Yeah.
other person knows it, right? They know the person's not okay. They're perceiving body language or emotions or whatever. But the reason the statement comes out, I'm fine, is typically it's a bid to see, will they press? Will
Yeah.
they recognize? Will they figure out what I want? But it is this, subconscious desire for them to mind read, and it isn't healthy and it's not fair either, right? Really, it's a
Hmm.
test. And I don't think any of us wants to take a test that we don't even know we're taking. And that's what creates a lot of times in our partners, if we are testing them and they don't even know it, and then they're failing because they don't even know, that creates a lot of animosity and frustration, and actually can often cause the other person to want to withdraw more because they're so afraid to get it wrong.
Oh my
And so then they
goodness.
often stop trying. And that's the opposite of what typically the person with the anxious attachment style wants. But this is why, to
Hmm.
move towards secure, to really summarize, the two people have to start meeting in the middle, resisting their own urges, right? The anxious
Hmm.
person, it's being willing to take pauses during conflict. It's being willing to learn how to seek, reassurance and validation a little bit more internally, right? So that it's not always on the other person. It's to communicate, hey, I'm needing a hug right now, or hey, I'm actually needing some reassurance, or are you mad at me? I have this story, you're mad at me, right? And
Hmm.
it's taking responsibility for how we feel instead of placing it on the other person, right?
Wow.
And then the
Oh my
person who's
goodness.
avoidant, it's, if they do need a break, it's communicating, okay, but let's come back in an hour. Letting the person with
Yeah.
anxious attachment style know, this is when I will come back. This is when we can revisit
Hmm.
this. That's what builds trust between the two people. Like, we are both doing work to kind of resist these childhood or subconscious attachment urges we have to withdraw or to pursue. And instead, we're both going to commit to work on that with each other so we can meet in the middle. And that's what
I
creates secure
love
attachment.
that. I love that. That's such a nice summary on everything that you do and work with um people, especially women. And I think I could talk your ear off for hours and hours and hours. But I just wanted to say, as a relationship coach, you were just helping normalize the experiences that so many women face. And I think that's so, so important. What is the one thing that you hope all women feel less ashamed about when it comes to their relationships or navigating their relationships?
Hmm. Two are competing in my mind.
Say them both then.
I'm going to say both. One is, again, doubt is normal. Doubt is
Hmm.
not a death sentence, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get to know yourself better, get to know your partner better, and an opportunity to create a deeper relationship. How freaking amazing is that? Let doubt
Hmm.
be a conduit for that, right? So that would be the one thing, let go of the shame that doubt is happening, because I don't care what couple you're idealizing or looking at, they have doubt too. Okay. From time to time, it is a very normal human experience. And I'm just going to take a pause to recall what the second one was. The other one would be dropping shame of having needs.
That's a
Specifically, if
good
you are,
one.
yeah, like every human in the entire world, again, has needs. The most happiest person, or again, the person we fantasize, everyone in the world has needs.
Hmm.
And if you are a person who, growing up, maybe your needs weren't fully met, or in relationships, you notice a theme where they often aren't met, the number one tip I have is, as you start embodying your needs more, communicating them more, and kind of, trying to actually have them met, it's going to feel selfish initially. It's going to feel needy initially, because when you're used to not like believing or feeling worthy of your own needs, anything is going to feel like too much. But keep going and know that you are worthy of your needs. And that if someone can't meet your needs, it doesn't mean you're not enough or you're asking for too much. It just means that they are not the person who's right for you.
Oh, I love it. Now, tell us where we can find you online, how we can work with you.
Yeah. So right now you can find me on Instagram at Dara Melanson Co. And Emily, maybe you'll put that in the show notes as well.
Of course.
And I am working on a website right now, but it's just kind of being designed in the background, but that should soon be uploaded. So I'll share more when that's ready.
Amazing.
And in terms of working with me, right now it's really through my signature one-on-one coaching program. It's called Bloom, because to me that just embodies what we as women are trying to do, right? We're not trying to, there's nothing broken about any of us who are on this personal growth journey. We're actually trying to expand, to bloom, to take up more space. And that's what my program is about. It's a 12-week program where I guide women, depending on the relationship phase they're in, to focus their attention inward, deepen the relationship they have with themselves, and through that self-discovery, figure out what it is they want and need, not only from life, but from love. And that's what I support women with.
Amazing. And lastly, before we go, if you could offer one final tip to our listeners, what would that be?
If you are someone who is known as very self-aware, you believe you're very self-aware, you really strive to understand why you do the things you do, or even listening to this podcast, like trying to understand yourself better. My tip is, if you are someone who is overly always wondering like what could be better, or working on what's not going well, taking time to make sure that you are also considering what is going well in your life or in your relationship, having gratitude for the things around us. Self-awareness is not just being aware of our flaws or, what we want to improve, but also our strengths and what we're really good at. Otherwise, if it's just about the former, that's actually just self-criticism. So my tip is really think about what's going well in life so you can bring balance, and that will help bring more clarity too around the things that maybe aren't feeling so good.
I love that. Oh, what a way to end this episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope all our listeners know that it's okay to go after what they want in a relationship now, even if it's the one that they have with themselves. Thanks again. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Real Happy Daughter, and remember that it takes immense courage to be yourself in a world that strives for conformity. So be brave and unleash your inner power.